Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Jackie Connor. I am the Associate Dean of the Executive MBA program at the Gazweta Business School at Emory University. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Taffeta Connery. She is the principal of Simpson Elementary School in the Gwinnett County Systems in Atlanta, Georgia. And we are here to talk about an abrupt shift to online learning, a tale of two very different academic environments. And some people find it ironic that we were collaborating on this very topic in truly a living case study, because we are colleagues, obviously, in the field of education, but we found a lot of similarities going through the pandemic, even though we were in very different academic environments. And so today we're going to talk about our living case study, and we're still living this case study, and the various components involved. So some of the learning outcomes that will be associated with this session that we'll be covering will be the discussion of governance and structures and how they impact a leader's ability to pivot. Also, we're going to be discussing how insights were gained on successes as well as challenges that were faced. We were trying to deliver high quality experiences to our population of students, both dealing with teachers, faculty, and not only students, but we also have to discuss parents as well. Even for my students, even though they're 60 years old, still a component. Also, we'll be analyzing how cultural norms and stakeholder expectations oftentimes dictate how you shape your own strategy. We'll be identifying fundamental instructional design principles and commonalities for all student levels. And then lastly, hopefully have the opportunity to collaborate with one another and discuss some of our personal initiatives and best practices. But then if we have time, we'll open it up to a further discussion within the room. So just to level set the conversation, one, to provide some context of the environments that we were working within in our various academic units. So one being higher education, the other being primary education, one being a private school, the other being a public school, but we are all working within the universe of the state of Georgia. And so within context of the United States of America's school system, we were dealing with the governance policies that were not only put on us at a federal level, but then even more specifically in the state of Georgia. And what was happening during the pandemic is Georgia was the first state to open. As you all can recall, the world was turned upside down in March 2020. Well, guess what? Our doors were opened up in April. And it caused lots and lots of controversy as well as challenges for the both of us. So that will set some context as to how we'll be discussing some of these components.
So again, my name is Taffeta Connery. I am the proud principal of Simpson Elementary School. And again, we're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And at my school, we have approximately 1,100 students, starting from pre-K through 5th grade. And we are also recognized not once but twice as the National Blue Ribbon School of Distinction. And it basically means that 90% or more of our students are high achieving and exceeding in the state of Georgia. So at Simpson Elementary School, prior to the pandemic, we had students participating already with online digital purposes and processes in place. So we participated in what we call Bring Your Own Device, BYOD. So students, if at this particular school, may have had the socioeconomic status to be able to bring their own devices. And if they did not, we supplied them for them at our district office. So we had BYOD, Bring Your Own Devices, and online platforms already within our school system for instruction. But at this time, before the pandemic, we utilized it for maybe severe weather. So if there was a hurricane or a tornado that was coming through the country and school was not in place for 3 to 4 days, we did not let learning stop. We continued with online platforms where teachers did a lot of their instruction, especially if there was maybe snow days. The instruction did not stop. We continued pushing forward to maintain our district calendars and remain consistent with student learning. So what was happening in March of 2020? We continued with In-person teaching and learning was in place. Again, we had bring your own devices. The platform that I discussed, think of it as a teacher website, but it's embedded in our district school system where students can access the teachers' websites to get through to online platforms for their assignments and also submit assignments. Teachers could also give feedback to those assignments, and also students can chime in. So think of it more of like a podcasting type of situation. And also students had their own, as far as middle through high school, they have their own student pages. We also, prior to the pandemic, conducted off-site field trips. We have a highly engaged parent community with a lot of parental teacher association events, parent-teacher conferences. A lot of that was also in person. And then came the pandemic.
So at Emory, what was happening, and just to, again, to level set, we're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We have multiple degree programs, undergraduate as well as graduate level programs. We have our executive MBA, in addition to our full-time MBA, an evening or part-time MBA program, our undergrad program, which is a BBA, Bachelor's of Business Administration, and an MS in Business Analytics. This is at the time. We now actually have a Master's of Analytics and Finance as well. Approximately 100 students were in the executive MBA program, and this program consists of individuals who are busy working professionals. Average age of our students was 40 years of age, but we had students, I think our max age was 60 years old, and our youngest was about 32. So this gives you an idea of the type of students that we were serving at the time and now. So for our culture, back in March 2020, online usage pre-COVID was minimal. We were very much a residential learning environment. And you can see from some of the imagery, these are some of our classrooms at the time. Faculty are highly engaged. Oftentimes in the business school community, we cold call our students to provoke engagement. Faculty members are more so facilitators rather than always lecturing. And it's very much engaged, high interactive community. But then in March 2020, what we were doing was we were actually preparing to launch what we now call the One Executive MBA, where we have on-campus students as well as hybrid students. And now in August, we will be launching a fully online version. So we were culturally preparing to get into a much more deeper, intimate level of virtual opportunities for our students. We were preparing to launch what we now call our global classrooms. And you can see from the imagery, these were actually mock-ups at the time of how we were trying to create these rooms so that we could have a much more engaging way of creating online education. We're looking to provide more flexibility in our platforms. So all of those conversations were happening in March 2020. And then came COVID.
So if you recall, Dr. Connor mentioned that, again, things were coming from the federal level and also to the state. So when it came to the state level of governance, again, our state opened in April, and then we had district level guidance that came directly to our school personnel. So again, even in the midst of the pandemic, we still had schools opening because we were also considered tier 2, what do we call? Essential workers. So we had to make sure the schools were open to be able to support those that might have been nurses, doctors, anybody that needed to be the first line of responders. So where are they going to put their children? So they were going to have them back in school, or they were trying to figure out who was going to be watching them if they did have this online digital learning process. So we were considered that second stage. So thank you, Dr. Connor. And also at a local school, we wanted to make sure that we had input from our parent community. How did they feel about that process? Did they feel like they wanted all of their students to be digital, or did they feel like they wanted to be in person? So I can't speak for other districts across the state of Georgia. I can only speak for those that happened here in Gwinnett County, that our local school leaders, they wanted to have input from our community. So we not only had input, both qualitative but quantitative feedback from not only my staff, but also school council, which has about 30 on average participation from our parents. Also from our Parent-Teacher Association that has a robust membership of 200 or more. And also principal conversations throughout this time in March and April. I conducted at least 20 over the 2-year period of what I like to call principal or conversations with Connery, where I had principal Zoom sessions just to keep them abreast of the current changes, communication, what's happening in the schools, how are we going to conduct our school business. And also, what's the point in having these conversations about children if not having their input? So we also had student council and peer leader input from students in our groups from age 4th and 5th grade. So a good percentage of the students at my particular school, I can only speak for my experience, we had about 15% that were online digital, remote learning in August of 2020. And about 85% of my students were in person. And why do you think that? Is because a lot of our parents believe that the best instruction should happen in person. And another percentage of students online was less than 10% by January of 2021. So at first it was 15%, then we dwindled down to 10%. And by the time we were almost towards the end of the pandemic, well, not really the end, but at the end of that first full year, we were approximately about 90% of in-person students were engaged in in-person learning options.
So our governance challenges, and again, we're in the same state, same governor, but our challenges were slightly different because we are a private school within the state. So we had to abide by federal regulations as well as state regulations. But by being a private institution, there was a lot more autonomy that the university had in setting guidance and rules. And the flip side of this is that many of the parents that she's speaking about that wanted their students to be in school, those type of parents are our students. And some of them actually worked for the CDC, and they were saying the opposite. None of us should be in school. We should all be at home. And so we're trying to balance these variety of philosophies and how you service all of your students with these mixed opinions and views on how to handle the information that we were all receiving and trying to digest at the time. So what happened at the university was the university actually allowed the faculty to choose. Do you want to teach in person or do you want to teach online? However, the students were then wondering, well, how do I make a decision? Is this professor going to be physically in the room? Are they going to be in line? So everyone has a choice. And if you can imagine from an administrative lens, trying to govern everyone choosing any option that you could think of, how do you actually manage that? And so it was very complicated. It was this confusing puzzle that we're trying to navigate and fix on a daily basis. And so once we had an understanding from the faculty who is going to be in person, who is going to be online, we asked them to at least commit to that mode of delivery for the semester. And same thing with the students. That was the request that we put on them as well. Could you at least commit to being either in person or online for a semester? And then we would, again, be flexible along the way. So those were some of our challenges that were occurring in higher education.
Now, I don't know if you caught that, but Dr. Connor mentioned the private sector, her staff had an opportunity to choose. Now, I don't know if you heard my spiel, because we work for a public school system, so the parents had the opportunity to choose, but did we? No, we didn't. So we did not. So that's where a little bit of the differences of the tale of two cities between the K through 12 versus the higher education. So again, we were declared by the state of Georgia as a tier 2 first or tier 2 responders to support all of those parents that were forced to go back to work. So that's another one of our differences. So that leads me to that support staff at Simpson Elementary. So the communication with those safety guidelines about students returning, communication at this point was key because we were not allowed to have those big informal meetings in person. So there was a lot of videos being sent. There was a lot of school messengers where it goes straight to your text message to your phone. A lot of newsletters, websites being posted, information being declared. All communication at this point was at its highest level, and just making sure that, because at that time a lot of us were uneasy and uncertain about the future. So we had district, very supportive district that, and our PTA, we have a very robust, very blessed PTA that even out of the gate, before the district even had even samples of what we should use, our parent-teacher association at our school purchased within the thousands, about $6,000 to $7,000 worth of PPE equipment. Anything from gloves to having any coverings, because again, we had special ed pre-K and we had special needs students. And they were young and small, and so sometimes we'll have to pick them up. So it's just a lot of the equipment that we were uncertain about touching and having a lot of hand sanitizer. We were buying all of that in bulk. We have a dedicated local clinic worker who managed a lot of our COVID-19, especially a database to monitor close contacts and who was a positive contact. In May of 2021, we had district-led opportunities for vaccinations. We also had a vaccination incentive plan in place for those that jumped on board to get vaccinated. There was a stipend associated with that. We were already about 80% there, which I'm very impressed with our district. Where about 80% of our technology and software was already in place. So we were already future driven at that point. The only thing we needed to focus on was what we call a one-to-one digital device, making sure every student had access to an education, also had access to Wi-Fi. What if there were some homes that didn't have that financial ability to have Wi-Fi in their home? So we also had our district partner with Sprint, and we had what we call hotspots to make sure the families had Wi-Fi internet access. I know some school districts call it blended learning. Ours was called concurrent teaching models. So just like at the collegiate level, we had very big monitors in place. We had upgrades to our software, but we had a lot of our students in person. So we might have had about 15 to 20 students sitting, maybe 20, sitting in a class, another 3 to 5 maybe coming through the room remotely. So we called that concurrent teaching, and it really was concurrent teaching. So some of those lesson plans that were developed for in-person students had to also be developed for those that were learning remotely, coming up with lessons in their breakout rooms, having the teacher teach one particular lesson in person, have the students work independently, and then go check on her friends via his or her friends via Zoom. So that lasted for over a year. And then again, I think another colleague here talked about the morale and how do you continue with promoting that positive school climate. There's a lot more I can go into detail, but let's just say when you are forced to come to work, what do you do to keep that staff pumped, ready, and engaged for those lessons? So that's another particular piece I'll go into a little bit later.
So for us, looking at faculty as well as staff support, We were very fortunate to have a dean, a president that was truly involved and engaged in supporting the flexibility that they wanted to offer to these students. So here you can see us in the classroom. We were behind plexiglass, makeshift walls. We're wearing our masks. People are in the room and they're also on Zoom. So we also had concurrent learning in a makeshift hybrid version that we have now advanced to a more improved design of hybrid learning. But again, we're all pivoting. We have to make do. And so this is the design that we had. We had to then hire what we called classroom associates. So these literally were individuals that were tech support for our faculty members who are in the room trying to figure out, how do I engage with Zoom? How do I engage with the people in front of me? How do I mute and unmute the microphone so that we're not getting reverb of sound? I mean, it's too much to do while you're trying to keep your train of thought and actually teach. And so faculty oftentimes would say, I'm not walking into that classroom unless a classroom associate is by my side. I'm not comfortable. And so we're able to provide that resource to our faculty. We did take advantage of the COVID care funding that was offered to institutions. And so we had a lot of PPE made available to our students and faculty. But again, people were not comfortable, even with all of these different components and resources that were offered. But we did have the choice, which was different than other organizations. And so morale was unique in that people that wanted to be there genuinely wanted to be in the room. People that wanted to be on Zoom genuinely wanted to be on Zoom. And so for the most part, people were actually very satisfied, very understanding, very amenable to what was going on and willing to be flexible and adjust given all of these different variety of circumstances. Now, going back to staff support as well as morale to some degree, no one was given any type of raise over the last 2 years, and people were quite burned out from going through these experiences. And so that actually is something that we're still grappling with today. How do you keep people engaged? And so we're having lots of conversations about, now what does the new work environment mean? Are we still going to have flexibility? How do we now make sure that everyone comes back to campus? And so these are still ongoing challenges, but we were grateful at the time to have the support we needed to get launched and going, because we were open in April 2020, but for us, we were literally back in the classroom August 2020.
So what is currently in place now? Gwinnett County Public Schools has provided parents with, again, those choice options for digital and in-person learning. So this past year, we had the opportunity to have, if those students still wanted to remain digital, we have what we called an online platform school. So those students can still register and enroll in an online platform if they wanted to, and then they could still come in person at our local school. Selections were completed via online selection process when they registered. I wanted to say, again, if they made a commitment to maybe being digital for the first semester at our online campus, then if they wanted to switch over to be in person in January, they were welcome to do so. Our Gwinnett County Public Schools Human Resource Department hired, just like Dr. Connor mentioned, her associates. We hired also additional teachers to support those digital learning and in-person instruction options. Those safety measures were still in place. We were very blessed to have those. We were blessed to given not just one mask, but a very big package of 3 to 4 of various school district colors. Also with hand sanitizer, gloves. We just had millions of little care packages that were given to us as a school. And also we were selected as a pilot and continue to do so for the entire next 2 years of what we called surveillance testing. So we had a clinic, a health department come into our school. So our parents signed up on a volunteer basis to have their child tested weekly for COVID-19. So we also randomly would get tested, but have those results instantaneous to us within about 24 hours about our results. So we were very blessed to also have that. Our instruction is balanced with paper pencil and online learning opportunities because we learned a lot from the pandemic, and we still offer the support of, if parents, for example, we have a grueling work schedule and we have our parent-teacher conferences. If they want to come in person, they can. If they still, for the flexibility, want to go via Zoom, we have that option for our parents. And other various staff development opportunities that we still do online. When it comes to student field trips, we're varying those options. We have a lot of outdoor field trips now that we're taking, and we also have some virtual online field trips that we've done. So we are continuing that balance as well. So just wanted to make sure that just because we are vaccinated and we're still in the midst of that pandemic, there were still a lot of great lessons learned that we're still going to utilize and keep in place due to the flexibility and our hectic work schedules, but also making sure that we maintain that balance.
So where are we at the Gozueta Business School for Executive Education? Definitely COVID's fast-tracked us to a place where we were already desiring to go, but we recognized we couldn't get there on our own. It really took going through this cultural shift and behavioral shift to get us to move into this direction. So now we are at a place of ultimate flexibility. Not only do we have a fully on-campus offering for our students, but we have a hybrid version where students can take classes in person. They can come 3 times a semester and conduct all of their other coursework online. And we're also launching a fully online version. And truly the mantra is meet people where they are, provide flexible learning for this working professionals population so that they can have work-life learning balance. You can see the imagery has changed. So at the beginning, I was showing prototypes of what our global classrooms look like. Now they are actually fully built. We have 3 global classrooms on campus and hope to build more. We have been able to better define what a hybrid or concurrent classroom teaching model can look like. So as you can see from the image on the right, we have added a full virtual row of students in our case room so that students can participate physically in the room as well as synchronously while being virtual in the back of the room via those monitors. And so now a faculty member doesn't have to worry about navigating Zoom when they walk into these types of classrooms. Their virtual students are present, their in-person students are present as well. We have been able to expand our virtual seats now in our fully online classes because we've built the global classroom with a large wall, and you can also add even more virtual seats in that space as well. So this pandemic has really changed our culture and our behavior of how we're choosing to provide educational experiences to our students, and really look at what are their new behaviors. But then also going back to our initial conversation about instruction and learning, making sure that we're always using those underlining instructional design principles regardless of what the format is. So I think this experience has not only enhanced us online, but it also has improved our in-person learning opportunities. So we did want to share this particular survey that we offered in the elementary school, and Dr. Connery and I partnered together on this particular collection of data through working on the school council because we really value the importance of data and not necessarily making assumptions of what people are thinking or assuming. We oftentimes would joke and say, well, what did you hear about at the bus stop? And we all know what you hear about at the bus stop is good data, but it may not be representative of majority of your population. And so we thought it was very important to actually talk to parents, get information about What are some themes with digital learning, and how can we incorporate this not only into our current practices, but even beyond? So we just wanted to share this as an example and importance of collecting this information. We also conducted a similar activity at the Executive MBA program where, again, let's not make an assumption that everyone wants to move to virtual learning or everyone wants to be on campus. Let's ask the question and get a better understanding of what people are considering. So I think we have a few minutes before we go into Q&A. What we wanted to do, if it's all right with the group, do what Dr. Connery calls a turn and talk. And if you could just turn and talk to your neighbor and talk about what have you learned from the response to the pandemic on any of these items where it comes to delivery options, your curriculum, stakeholder satisfaction, governance. We're just going to take a few minutes and then open it for Q&A if that's okay.
At this time, thank you so much for just turning with a partner and just expressing your thoughts about your response from the pandemic. Is there anybody that would like to just share anything that you've learned or gleaned from the presentation in regards to your response to the pandemic? If anything was similar, different, maybe a lot alike in some ways, but maybe different? There's somebody sitting right beside you, sir, that I would love for this beautiful graduate student with the glasses right behind you. She's behind you. And I would love for her to share her perspective because I thought it was really good. Please tell us your name and then your beautiful comment that you shared.
Hi, I'm Nicole. So I did part of my master's degree online when COVID hit. So my experience was, it was fully remote. And then when it changed to being a hybrid experience, and I actually moved to New York to start attending classes, the students who could not even come into the US, they didn't have that opportunity. Their experience was extremely limited because of the setup of the classroom. So they were there, but there were all these technical issues with being able to hear or even being able to be part of the discussion because often the professor, just the setup of the room itself. So to have an opportunity with this incredible wall of like the screens and being
That
able
global
to,
classroom.
the global classroom,
Mhm.
Thank you. So being able to have the discussions and even the software to keep pulling people back in when they've been when they've lost engagement, that would have been great experience to have had. So just looking at the different ways that a hybrid model works is interesting.
Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else?
Peter Glazer, and I was curious, and I guess I'm most curious with you, Dr. Connery.
Yes, sir.
What did you measure learning outcomes between the people who were at home, watching, versus the people who actually came in? And what were those different? It sounds like you're saying yes, you did measure that. And what was the difference? Really? Okay.
So, student achievement at the very beginning was a little the same, but as months started trickling in, 3 months into in-person instruction, a longer digital experience, we realized a lot of our students, for whatever reason, were falling a little bit behind. I don't know if it's because more of an independent study habits or maybe parental support in the home. There were some students that might have had 4 or 5 siblings in the home, and it might have been difficult for them to study. Some of those variables differed from family to family, but we did start to see after about 3 months in a very difference, and it started becoming more of a gap in that instruction. So by October, because schools for us start in August, by October, anybody I can only speak for my particular school, that started scoring around the 70th percentile or lower, we had parent-teacher conferences and we invited them in and they came. Yes, we talked to the parent about some struggles and some challenges, maybe not being online. When we asked them, show your face on the camera. That was a whole nother big to-do about showing themselves on the screen when they're probably playing video games and not really paying attention to the teacher. So that became another one of those norms of being online. Some norms were having your camera on, be in front of your camera at a certain time. We're starting instruction at 9 o'clock. Why are you coming on at 10 o'clock? So if there were some struggles, by October, we had a parent-teacher conference, and I said, I don't want to leave any child behind. You do whatever you need to do. Contact our parents. Let them know where their child is at the moment in regards to instruction. And by golly, those parents said, I understand. We're going to follow some safety rules. We're going to put on some masks, and they came. A lot of our big advocates were our special needs parents who felt that it was a challenge it was becoming a deficit for their special needs children. And they were one of the first to say, we're coming back. So thank you so much for that question.
I have a similar question for Jackie, and I'm wondering, especially now that you've transitioned, I mean, I understand that you have full present, you have hybrid, you have full remote, and I'm assuming you collect data around that. And I'm guessing they're in two kind of different arenas. One is, are they learning what you're hoping they're learning? And the other is, what is their level of satisfaction with the MBA program? Do you have differences yet? Is it so new that you don't know yet, or what are you finding?
Sure. So for the fully online version, that's so new we don't know yet. That will launch in August. But in comparison of the fully on campus versus the hybrid, it's ironic that the hybrid students were more high achieving than the fully on campus students. But I think it's also because of the hybrid students' commitment to learning. And so those students made those decisions, we found out, primarily based on their careers. So in our hybrid sessions, many of those students are physicians, work at the CDC, and they have a different view of what it means to be in person right now versus to be online. Also, what we found with some of the hybrid students is they made the comment, literally this happened this week because they had class. The students said, when it's 10 p.m. and class ends, I can go down the hallway and go to bed.
Right.
For the fully on campus students who have classes Friday night that end at 9, 10 p.m., they then have to commute, get home, and then also be back to campus at 8 a.m. the next day. And so we're hearing, it's ironic now in the summer, our hybrid students have a very high level of satisfaction, and the on-campus students, they're stressed, they're tired, they're struggling. And so what we do see now with these two formats is what we allow students to do is in between semesters, if they present a hardship, they can actually switch formats. We've had more students switch from on-campus to hybrid than hybrid to on-campus.
Wow.
So it's interesting to watch.
Well, I have one more, but I will wait until everybody else wants to.
Thanks for this. I have a very visceral reaction to these stories because I was in Atlanta at the time in a different context at Georgia Tech, which is kind of halfway in between your circumstances, part of the state system, but with the reputation of an international institution of higher education, right? In which the ability to be independent was curtailed, but the desire or the expectation in the community that we would be so, right, was also present. In other words, we weren't like, well, this state is what it is, politics, but also we couldn't just kind of choose our way out of it. So I'm wondering, you told this tale of sort of two scenarios. What others did you see, maybe in the area or maybe further afield? Are there other models that you've been watching, not so much in terms of how people solve these problems, but how their institutional contexts structured the responses that they were able to conceive of and execute?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So we spent a lot of time speaking with our colleagues at other business schools in the Atlanta area. And we heard I'll say in two perspectives, the perspective of morale versus the perspective of support. And so when it came to morale, we were hearing from our colleagues that morale was lower, and this is just for business schools, in schools where faculty members did not have a choice. And so there was a lot of concern. We had a lot of faculty looking to switch and say, well, are you all hiring at Emory? Can I come teach there because I need choice because of whatever may be happening in my household? But the other side we heard was support, because many faculty felt, if you're going to make me come to work and teach, what kind of support can you provide? And so we shared a lot of best practices around technology. I would say with my colleagues at Georgia State, they have similar classrooms. And so they were able to even help us as far as navigating what technological support we needed to provide. But it was definitely hard, and politics obviously were involved. But I definitely feel, and this was something we've been talking about when it comes to administrators and leaders, how much that governance structure impacts the way you can pivot and what even options you have to consider when you're trying to make adjustments for different populations of individuals. So yes, we definitely reached out to colleagues in Atlanta to find out how is everyone surviving.
And I would also, I'm so glad you mentioned morale, because again, I always follow the philosophy, you can only change what you're in control of, and you can't control every single thing. So even though we were required to come back, I did everything, and also my administrative team, to at least let them know that we cared. So maybe after the students left for the day, I had massage chairs waiting for them, or I had meals, I had breakfast, I had business partners that I reached out to them. They brought food trucks, treated them to lunch. It's not the fact that I could increase their pay, but let them know that I appreciate the job that you're doing. I want to lead with my heart and let you know that I'm here. I even left encouraging notes to let them know how much I appreciate them. Our parents from our community wrote notes. It became a community-filled appreciation for our teachers. And we just said that they were and still are our heroes, because it's very difficult to teach a kindergartner via Zoom how to read. And you're just learning how to read for the first time. You're learning syllables, vowels, blends, sounds. So for them to say, you know what, I don't care about my health, I'm gonna come here anyway, because a lot of the very beginning was a lot of unknown. So we just tried everything in our power to lead with our heart and let them know that we cared and we appreciated them. Couldn't give them a raise, but boy, did they gain those COVID 50 pounds or COVID 20 pounds, because we were feeding them. Business partners were very helpful with food trucks, like I said, even a coffee bean truck to surprise them. Just come on out here, grab yourself some hot tea, some hot cocoa, a bagel, and let's get to work. So just trying to keep that positivity with, I'm very big on personalized stationery. And so sometimes I put a little bit of stationery either in their mailbox or in their desk, just little things for the last 2 years, just to let them know how much we appreciated them.
Taffeta, you must be a beloved principal.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'll bet. So I was curious, what percentage of faculty decided to be in person versus virtual?
So in August, it was about 50-50. So we literally had some classes where students were in the room and the faculty member was on the projector teaching via Zoom. We had some classes where the professor would come in person. We were behind those plexiglass shield walls. We were all wearing masks. So we had that set up as well. So it really was 50-50 in the fall. By the time we got to spring, we had more faculty members coming into the classroom. And now, fast forward to fall 2021, our campus is actually 98% vaccinated individuals. And so now the level of safety and comfort has risen quite a bit, to the point where the president of the university has said, we're going back to being a residential school. Now, we've maintained our flexibility for our working professionals population, but definitely for the undergraduate students, they're all in person.
And even though we were required to be in person, that doesn't mean people wanted to be vaccinated right away. So I'm very happy to say that we were about 80%. I don't know as far as names, but I get numbers and stats. So we were about 80 to 85% vaccinated as a staff as well.
Quick question. Did you have any cases of COVID or deaths or anything like that in your group?
Did you say deaths or just COVID?
Cases of diseases or even this or
Yeah. Want to go, Paul? Yes, we did. Now, what happened in August 2020, that first semester, as well as, so for 2021 academic year, we did not have any, to note, transformations of COVID in the classroom. Now, what was happening socially outside of the classroom, we could not control. But when we conducted our contact tracing, when someone would test positive, it was always traced to someone outside of the classroom. So that did maintain a high level of comfort. We actually had an event, this was February, it was March 2021, and I'll never forget it because what happened was we had a very large scale event. It was probably the first large scale event on campus. So we're talking, 100 people in a packed room. We're all wearing masks, but we're 6 feet apart. I get the emails. They start coming in. This person's positive. This person's positive. Our dean was there. We had high-level speakers that we had just invited back to campus because it was pathway to the C-suites. We had C-level individuals from these various corporations. So I'm getting these emails, and the only reason I remember is because it was my birthday, and it was the worst birthday of my life because I'm thinking, I just held a super spreader on campus. I promise you, the people who tested positive, they were nowhere connected on the contact tracing, and they all had contracted COVID outside of that event. So I will say Emory University did an excellent job of following the various recommendations, keeping people safe, and that really has increased our level of comfort to this point in time.
On behalf of our school district, which has 180,000 employees, I want to say there was probably 1 to 2 deaths related to COVID, but there were 0 at my school in particular.
I think mine is more of a public health question, so you may not know it. Coming from the Pacific Northwest, which seems like it would be on the opposite end of the continuum to where you are in terms of opening. You opened in April. I'm guessing Pacific Northwest schools didn't open until the next April. I'm just wondering if there are any data around the same sort of question about COVID cases, COVID deaths, deep illness, that are differences between those schools that said, we're coming back in 1 month, and those schools that said, count us in 15 months.
I'm almost certain, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost certain that that's data that the CDC is tapping into now. And I'm sure maybe within the next year or so, we'll have more sustainable information. Mm-hmm. But there is definitely some differences from a lot of our colleagues of what has transpired from the north versus the south and east and west. Mm-hmm. I have colleagues all over the country, and we're all comparing notes. But I'm sure that is probably something that's being comprised with the CDC.
Stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To be continued. And we only have time for one more question.
Yeah, we actually got a comment from Vimala. She appreciates your responses, and she would like to know, did your funding sources mainly come from business sector? Should I repeat that?
Yes. So for our school, we took advantage of the COVID care funding that was provided from the U.S. government. And then our university also provided additional funding to each of the schools within the system to be able to hire individuals like classroom associates and different resources that we needed.
And that's the same for me. Our school district participated in a lot of the COVID Care Act funds with a lot of the PPE, different additional personnel resources, including hiring additional digital teachers for our online campus. So we were very supportive in that type of funding. Well, we want to thank you all for your time and your energy, especially all your great questions that you have given us. And we appreciate this wonderful platform that you've given for us. And we hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming.